Everything in this story is Star Wars Legends, the sprawling, expanded universe that Lucasfilm officially decanonized on April 25, 2014, when Disney created the Lucasfilm Story Group to establish a single canon timeline. The Yuuzhan Vong don't exist in current Disney canon. They have never appeared in any film, series, or canonical story. What follows is entirely from the Legends material. 19 novels published between 1999 and 2003, plus the wider expanded universe built around them. Keep that in mind, because what those books contained is one of the most disturbing things Star Wars ever attempted. Everything in this galaxy can be felt through the Force. That's the foundation, the axiom the entire setting is built on. The Force, as described in the original film, is an energy field created by all living things, binding the galaxy together. Every Jedi is trained to read it, to sense life within it, to feel the intentions of an opponent before the blow lands. Every Sith hunts through it. For 25 years after the Battle of Yavin, Luke Skywalker's rebuilt Jedi Order operated on that foundation, sensing the threads of the galaxy around them. Then, in 25 ABY, roughly 21 years after Return of the Jedi, something arrived that the Force couldn't see. Jedi encountering Yuuzhan Vong warriors for the first time described it as reaching out and finding a void. Not darkness, not a hostile presence, nothing. A blank where a living being should register. In-novel accounts describe Jacen Solo experiencing the blank terror of discovering that his Force powers meant nothing against the Yuuzhan Vong. Not reduced, not blocked, meant nothing. This is what made them categorically different from every prior threat in the setting. The Empire had officers and stormtroopers, all of whom existed in the Force, all of whom could be read, predicted, or influenced. Darth Vader hunted through the Force. The Sith were terrifying precisely because they weaponized it. The Yuuzhan Vong existed outside that entire framework. Their minds couldn't be read. Their intentions couldn't be sensed. A Jedi's combat precognition, the ability to feel a strike before it lands, failed against them completely. Their troop movements were invisible to Force reconnaissance. The galaxy's most powerful information advantage evaporated against an army of millions. There are competing explanations in the Legends material for why, and they matter. Early New Jedi Order novels presented it simply. The Vong were beyond the Force, immune to it. Later, in the Unifying Force, the series finale, a different explanation emerged. When the Vong destroyed their ancient homeworld of Yuuzhan Tar in their own wars, the entire species lost its connection to the Force. Severed, not absent. A broken link rather than a fundamental incompatibility. A philosopher among the Vong's captives, a former Jedi named Vergir, who had lived with them for 50 years, argued something stranger still. The Vong were in the Force, connected on a plane that Jedi perception simply couldn't reach. Their absence from Jedi senses wasn't evidence of their exclusion from reality, it was evidence of the limits of Jedi understanding. That argument destabilized 2,000 years of Jedi doctrine and produced the most philosophically serious character arc the franchise ever attempted. But the war itself has to come first. The Yuuzhan Vong came from outside the galaxy entirely. Their homeworld, Yuuzhan Tar, existed in another galaxy, unnamed in most sources, defined by its devastation. They didn't flee a dying star or an external catastrophe. They destroyed their own world. Through millennia of brutal internal warfare, using the same biotechnology they'd later turn on the Star Wars galaxy, they rendered Yuuzhan Tar uninhabitable. What forced them into the intergalactic void was their own excess, and having stripped their home galaxy, they set course for another one, in the name of their gods. The world ships that carried their civilization across the void were ancient, near the end of their lifespans, by the time they arrived. Living structures the size of small moons, housing entire communities across generations. Not a fleet of metal vessels, living city-states drifting through a dead gulf that no civilization in the Star Wars galaxy had ever attempted to cross. Here is the detail that reframes the entire setting. In 1998, Timothy Zahn published Vision of the Future, the concluding novel of his Hand of Thrawn duology, and introduced a concept he called the Far Outsiders, an unnamed extragalactic threat the Chiss were quietly preparing to resist. Thrawn's entire long-game strategy in those novels was motivated, at least partly, by awareness of something approaching from beyond the galaxy's edge. Zahn later confirmed in interviews that he intended the Far Outsiders to be the Yuuzhan Vong. The connection is an authorial confirmation made outside the novels, not an explicit on-page declaration. And in current Disney canon, Zahn has remapped that concept to a different species entirely, the Grisk. But in Legends, the implication stands. The setting's own history was quietly building toward this. The galaxy's greatest military mind had been preparing. The galaxy just didn't know the enemy's name. The Force blindness alone doesn't account for the scale of the catastrophe that followed. It was the entire civilization they brought with them that broke every tactical framework the galaxy had developed. The Yuuzhan Vong rejected mechanical technology entirely, not as a limitation, as a religious conviction. Machines were heretical. Life was sacred. Every weapon, every ship, every piece of armor was a living organism, bred and shaped by a specialist caste called Shapers for a specific function. Their starfighters, coral skippers, grown from Yorick coral, were equipped with Dovin basals, living gravitic organs that created localized gravity wells, bending or swallowing incoming blaster fire rather than blocking it with conventional deflectors. You can't hack a living thing. You can't jam an organism. The entire galaxy's doctrine for electronic warfare, slicing and jamming, had nothing to latch onto. Their warriors carried amphistaffs, serpentine creatures that could rigidify into a fighting staff, flex into a whip, or spit lethal venom up to 20 meters. Their armor was Von Dune Crab, a living exoskeleton bonded to the warrior's body, self-healing, resistant to energy weapons, resistant even to lightsabers. Against a Jedi whose danger sense didn't work, wearing armor that stopped a lightsaber, carrying a weapon that changed shape mid-fight. That's not just a difficult opponent. That's a systematic negation of everything a Jedi training program prepared someone for. Their capital ships were world ships, living structures that dwarfed anything in the Republic or Imperial fleets. Their equivalent of a planetary atrocity was a tactic called Yogan's Core, first developed by a Vong commander roughly 15,000 years before the invasion. Plant a Dovin basal on a planet's surface, have it interact with the planet's gravitational field, pull a moon out of orbit, and let the moon do the rest. It was designed as a terror tactic. By the time they used it on the Star Wars galaxy, it was just doctrine. The theology behind all of this was genuine and internally coherent. Their creator god, Yuuzhan, had dismembered himself to create the universe and the Vong species. Pain and sacrifice were written into the cosmology at the origin point. The embrace of pain was a living torture device used not just on prisoners, but on Vong warriors themselves, as a rite of passage and a test of spiritual worth. Scars, implants, bodily modifications, marks of devotion, not disfigurement. The more suffering a warrior had accepted, the higher their standing. Combat was liturgy. To fight was to worship Yunyamka, the war god. If the Borg come to mind, the hive mind assimilators who reduce civilizations to biomechanical drones, the Vong were effectively the inverse. Not a collective, but a rigid, deeply individualized theocracy, fanatically hierarchical, with a caste system running from warriors and shapers down to workers, slaves, and the shamed ones, whose bodies had rejected implants and who were considered cursed. And if Warhammer 40k's Tyranids come to mind, the extragalactic biotech swarm that consumes worlds. The Vong shared the extragalactic origin and the living weapon paradigm, but had something the Tyranids don't: a complete, sophisticated theological framework in which every act of conquest was simultaneously a religious statement. They didn't just want to win, they wanted the galaxy to become their new Yuuzhan Tar. One of the first major strikes of the invasion in 25 ABY was Cernpedal. A Dovin basal planted on the surface, the moon Dobido pulled from orbit, Dobido impacting the planet. Chewbacca died there, and this was before the main Yuuzhan Vong invasion force had even arrived in the galaxy. Ithor followed, one of the oldest, most ecologically significant worlds in the galaxy, an ancient member of the Republic. The Vong delivered a biological weapon in 12 seed-shaped Yorick coral pods that detonated in the atmosphere and destroyed Ithor's biosphere. They didn't just kill people, they killed the planet. Then, in 27 ABY, the Yuuzhan Vong captured Coruscant, the galactic capital, the city-world at the center of every map, every government, every intelligence network the galaxy had built. The Vong subjected it to planet shaping, tearing out the city infrastructure, planting living Vong organisms across the surface, replacing 10,000 years of civilization with their own structures. One of Coruscant's moons was destroyed. The debris became what they called the Rainbow Bridge. They renamed the planet Yuuzhan Tar, after the homeworld they had destroyed, imposing the name of their greatest loss onto the galaxy's greatest prize. The New Republic effectively collapsed. Former enemies, including the Imperial Remnant, joined a new coalition called the Galactic Alliance to continue the fight. The death toll, per Legends companion materials and published summaries, is cited at upwards of 300 trillion beings. Some reference sources place the figure at 365 trillion. Not millions, not billions, trillions in 4 years. The Clone Wars, the Galactic Civil War, every prior conflict in the setting combined, nothing came close. The war lasted until 29 ABY. The Vong were defeated. But what it cost the Jedi was harder to quantify than casualties. The Force blindness created 3 distinct crises for the Order, running at different depths. The tactical one was manageable. Jedi could sometimes sense the living projectiles the Vong launched, even when they couldn't sense the Vong launching them. New combat approaches developed. A handful of individuals found limited ways to perceive Vong biotech. Tactical problems have tactical solutions. The institutional crisis was harder. The Order fractured. Luke argued for restraint. Jedi should serve the Force first, government second. Kip Duran argued for aggressive intervention. From the civilian population came something worse. The Jedi became scapegoats, blamed for failing to prevent a disaster they hadn't predicted and couldn't sense coming. Anti-Jedi sentiment surged across a New Republic that was already buckling. The philosophical crisis was the one that mattered most. If the Force is created by all living things, then why don't the Yuuzhan Vong appear in it? They breathe, they bleed, they feel pain. Their theology is built entirely on suffering, which requires consciousness and sensation. 3 possible answers, and none comfortable. The Force has limits. The Jedi's understanding of the Force is wrong. Or, the Vong aren't truly alive in some fundamental sense. That third option raises questions about what life means that the books refuse to answer cleanly. Vergier's position was the most destabilizing. A former Jedi who had spent 50 years living among the Vong, she became the philosophical mentor to Jacen Solo during his captivity, during which he was subjected to the embrace of pain for an extended period. Her teaching, the Vong were in the Force all along, on a plane the Jedi couldn't perceive. Their Force absence wasn't the Vong's limitation, it was the Jedi's. And the Force doesn't divide neatly into light and dark. That's a framework Jedi imposed on it. This remains the most contested intellectual territory in expanded universe history. Later Legends series partially retconned Vergier as having Sith influences, casting her teachings in a darker light. The original NJO authors didn't intend her that way. Whether she was an ultra-traditionalist reading the Force through a pre-dualistic lens, or something more dangerous, was never fully resolved before decanonization closed the debate. The books left it open, deliberately. That's what made it serious literature. Jacen Solo emerged from the war fundamentally changed. From a young Jedi who questioned whether the Force should be used as a weapon at all, through the philosophical furnace of captivity and prolonged torture, to a Jedi seeking to understand his enemy rather than simply exterminate it, his arc across the new Jedi Order is the most morally serious character trajectory the franchise ever put on the page. The seeds that later Legends material traced into catastrophe were planted in that war. The final novel, The Unifying Force by James Luceno, published in November 2003, ended with something unusual for Star Wars. Not just military victory, but a kind of restoration. The Vong's severed connection to the Force was healed at the narrative's resolution. The war ended as a metaphysical event, not merely a military one. 19 novels, 12 authors. The series began in October 1999 with Vector Prime by R.A. Salvatore. Every single book made the New York Times bestseller list. Every one. By the end of 2005, the series had sold over 4 million copies. These weren't cult texts for obsessive readers. This was the mainstream of Star Wars publishing, and it ended, finished and fully resolved, in 2003, a full decade before Disney bought the franchise. The Force Awakens, released in December 2015, set approximately 34 ABY, the same rough chronological window in which the new Jedi Order was originally set, giving the production team a direct line between where the films left off and where the books had already gone. The opportunity was concrete, an extragalactic enemy that was genuinely alien, genuinely different from every prior Star Wars antagonist. An enemy that justified why Luke Skywalker might have become a different kind of man. A war that explained why the galaxy might have been fractured, why the Jedi Order might have nearly broken, why the New Republic's successor government might be struggling 30 years after Endor. Instead, the sequel trilogy resurrected Palpatine, built its primary antagonist as a First Order that was functionally the Empire with updated uniforms, and told a story about internal conflict among the Skywalker bloodline. Next to a finished, beloved war story sitting right there in the publishing record, an external threat forcing the galaxy to confront every structural weakness it had developed during millennia of fighting itself, the choice was a retreat to familiar architecture. The galaxy in Star Wars has always been a civilization at war with itself. The Republic against the Separatists, the Empire against the Rebellion, the First Order against the Resistance. Every conflict internal, every enemy already inside the map. The Yuuzhan Vong arrived from outside it, and nearly won precisely because the galaxy had spent its entire history perfecting its ability to fight itself, and had built nothing for what came through the door. An enemy you can't feel. An army that grows its weapons out of living flesh and worships the pain it causes. A nightmare that crossed the dead gulf between galaxies and, in 4 years, nearly did what the Sith and the Empire never managed. The Yuuzhan Vong are the biggest, darkest, most ambitious story Star Wars ever put on the page. And it's all right there, finished, in books a generation grew up on, sitting in the Legends archive since April 25th, 2014. The door is still there. So is what came through it. Subscribe for more stories like this.